Today we are going to take our next topic, the fate of insecticides in soil and plant. See, when a pesticide is released into the environment, many things have to happen with it. Sometimes what happens is beneficial. For example, the leaching of some herbicides into the root zone can give you better weed control. Sometimes releasing pesticides into the environment can be harmful as not of all the applied chemical reaches the target sites. Another example, runoff can move a herbicide away from the target weed. The chemical get wasted, that's why, and weed control get reduced, that's why, and there is a more chance of damaging other plants and polluting soil and water. And some of the pesticide may drift downward and outside of the intended application sites. Many processes affect what happens to the pesticides in the environment. And these processes are absorption, transfer, breakdown, and the degradation. Under that transfer process that moves the pesticides away from the target sites, and this transfer process includes volatilization, spray drift, runoff, leaching, absorption, crop removal. This is the schematic representation of loss of pesticides. How? Transfer process, in that the adsorption is the binding of pesticides to the soil particle. The amount a pesticide is adsorbed to the soil varies with the type of pesticide, soil moisture, soil pH, and the soil texture. The pesticides are strongly adsorbed to the soil that are high in clay or organic matter. Then they are not strongly adsorbed to the sandy soil as compared to the clay soil. The most soil-bound pesticides are less likely to give off the vapors or leach through the soil. Okay, they are also less easily taken up by the plant. And for this reason, you may require higher rate listed on the pesticide label for the soils high in clay and organic matter. Are you getting? The soil which are high in clay, there is a strongly adsorption of the pesticides on the soil. That's why before application, you must see the higher rate listed on the pesticide. Transfer losses, volatilization. It is the process of solid and liquid conversion into a gas, and which can move away from the initial application site. And this movement is known as the vapor drift. Vapor drift from some herbicide can damages the nearby crop. Then pesticide volatilizes more readily from the sandy and the wet soil. Hot, dry, and windy weather and small spray drops increases the volatilization losses, where the recommended incorporating pesticides into the soil can help to reduce the volatilization. Next is the spray drift, is the airborne movement of the spray droplets away from a treatment site during the application. Spray drift is affected by many factors like spray droplet size. Smaller the droplet, more likely they will drift away from the application sites. If wind speed is greater, then their more pesticide spray will be drift. And if distance is greater between nozzle and the target plant, then there is a more wind can affect the spray. We have to take care of all these things. Then drift can damage nearby sensitive crops, then can contaminate the crops ready to harvest. Then drift may also be hazardous to the people, then domestic animals, then pollinating insects. The drift can contaminate water in ponds, streams, and ditches and harm fish or other aquatic plants and the animals. If excessive drift is there, also reduces the pesticides applied to the target and can reduce the effectiveness of the treatment. Then runoff is movement of pesticides in water on the sloping surface. The pesticides are either mixed in water or bound to the eroding soils. The runoff can also occur when water is added to the field faster than it can be absorbed into the soil. The pesticides may move with runoff as compound dissolve in the water or attached to the soil particle. The amount of pesticide runoff, it depends on what is the slope of that area, then what is the texture of that soil of that area, then what is the soil moisture condition, then amount and the timing of the rain event, then the type of pesticides used. The runoff from this area treated with the pesticides can pollute nearby streams, ponds, lakes, and the wells. Okay, the pesticide residues in surface water can harm the plants, animals, contaminate the groundwater, and this water contamination affect on the livestock and the crop downstream. We can reduce this pesticide runoff by using minimum tillage techniques to reduce the soil erosion. We have to control the soil erosion. Then we have to grading the surface to reduce the slopes. Then diking to contain the runoff, then leaving border vegetation. That's why the plant cover to contain runoff pesticide losses from the runoff are greatest when it rains heavily right after you spray. Then reduce the chances of runoff by watching the weather forecast. If heavy rain is expected, delay the spray to avoid the runoff. Irrigate according to the label instruction. Leaching is movement of the pesticides in water through the soil. Leaching occur downward, upward, and the sideways. These are the factors which influences the pesticide to be leached into the groundwater, include characteristics and the characteristics of the pesticides and the soil, their interaction with water from a rain event such as irrigation or rainfall. This leaching can be increased if pesticide is water soluble, the soil is sandy, a rain event occurs shortly after spraying, and if pesticide is not strongly absorbed to the soil, there is a loss of leaching losses or runoff. This is also the table showing that the risk of groundwater contamination, low risk, high risk. When low risk is there, when high risk is there, these are the pesticide characteristics. Accordingly, the low risk and high risk table is given. Soil characteristics. See, the clay soil having the high capacity to absorb the many chemicals, including pesticides as well as soil nutrients. And these pesticides releases slowly from the clay, whereas the sandy soil having much lower capacity to absorb the pesticides. Organic matter in soil can also absorb the pesticides. Then soil structure influences the movement of water and the pesticides. If coarse texture sandy soil with large air spaces is there, allow more rapid movement of water than the fine texture soil with fewer air spaces. Then other characteristics of the site such as depth to the groundwater or distance to the surface water are also important. Finally, the pattern of water falling on the soil through the irrigation or rainfall is significant. Small amount of water at infrequent interval are less likely to move the pesticides than the large volume of water at more frequent interval. Absorption. It is the uptake of pesticides and other chemicals into the plants or the microorganism. The most of the pesticides break down once they get absorbed. The pesticide residues may be broken down or remain inside the plant or animal and be released back into the environment when animal dies or the plant get died. Some pesticides stay in soil long enough to be absorbed by the plant grown in a field years later. They damages or leave the pesticides in the pesticide residues for the future crops. Crop removal through the harvest or grazing may remove the pesticide residues. Degradation or breakdown process. What is that process? Degradation is the process of pesticide breakdown after application. It is the process of pesticide breakdown after application. These pesticides are broken down by the microbes, then chemical reactions or light or photo degradation. This process may take anywhere from the hours or days to the years, depending on the environmental conditions and the chemical characteristics of that pesticides. The pesticides that break down quickly generally do not persist in the environment or on the crop for the last year. However, the pesticides that break down too rapidly may only provide short-term control. This is next is the microbial breakdown. It is the breakdown of chemical by the microorganisms such as fungi and the bacteria. And this when they get into increased temperature are warm, then soil pH is favorable, soil moisture and oxygen are adequate, soil fertility is good. The chemical breakdown is the breakdown of pesticide by the chemical reaction in the soil. Next is the chemical breakdown. And the rate and the type of chemical breakdown reaction that occurs influenced by binding of pesticides to the soil. What is the binding or bond of pesticides to the soil? Soil temperature condition, then pH level and the soil moisture level. This is microbial breakdown and the chemical breakdown. This is degradation, photodegradation or light degradation. It is the breakdown of pesticides by the sunlight only. All the pesticides are susceptible to the light degradation to the some extent. The rate of breakdown by the light is influenced by the intensity and the spectrum of sunlight, then length of exposure, then the properties of the pesticides. The pesticides applied to the foliage are more exposed to the sunlight than the pesticides that are incorporated into the soil. The pesticides may break down faster inside the plastic covered greenhouses than the inside glass greenhouses, since the glass is filters out much of the ultraviolet light that degrades the pesticides. The pesticide characteristics are also important in determining the fate of chemicals in the environment. These characteristics are: what is the solubility condition of pesticides in water, then what is the tendency of that pesticide to adsorb on the soil, then pesticide persistence in the environment. Ways to minimize the pesticide impact. Integrated pest management. Follow the IPM principles. IPM doesn't roll solely on the chemicals for the pest control. It includes biological control, cultural practices, and timely chemical applications that are used to obtain the necessary level of control. The pesticides are last line of defense and are used only when pest level are causing sufficient damage to offset the expense of the application. Integrated pest management. Then prevent backsiphoning and the spills. Never allow a hose used for filling a spray tank to extend below the level of water in tank. Then contain all spills as quickly as possible and handle according to the label in direction. Then use anti-siphon devices in the water lines. They are inexpensive and effective. Then consider weather condition and irrigation plans. While application just before the rainfall or irrigation may result in reduced efficiency of pesticides as the pesticide get washed off the target crop, resulting in need to reapply the pesticide. So heavy rainfall may also causes the pesticide contaminated runoff at the application site. So consider the weather and the irrigation plans. Then pesticide use and the storage. See, always read and follow the label instruction on the pesticide container. Then use the pesticides only when economic thresholds are reached and buy only what you need. Then use appropriate protective equipment, then clothing according to the label instruction. Then avoid the mixing of pesticides near the wells or other sources of water. Then store all the pesticides safely and according to the legal requirement. Then dispose of pesticides and chemical waste safely. See, the dispose of the excess chemical and pesticide containers in accordance with the label direction. Then triple rinse empty pesticide container. Then use punch holes in container and dispose of them at approved waste disposal sites. Then next is the leave buffer zones around the sensitive areas. See, read the pesticide label for guidance on required buffer zones around the water, building, wetlands, wildlife habitats, and other sensitive areas. Then reduce of target drift. Never begin an application when wind or temperature favor the pesticide drift to an off-target area. Use the appropriate spray pressure and nozzle selection to minimize the drift. And next is the application equipment. Maintain all the application equipment in good working order condition and calibrate it regularly. This is about the fate of pesticides or insecticides in soil and plant. Next is the insecticide resistance and its management. Resistance, a genetic change in an organism in the response to the selection by the pesticides, which may impair control in the field. This is known as the resistance. Next is the resistance mechanism, the biological process used by the pest to avoid the lethal action of the pesticide. And this resistance organism may have more than one resistance mechanism. Behavior resistance, any modification in pest behavior that helps the pest to avoid the lethal effect of the pesticides. The pest organisms is still sensitive to the pesticides and will be killed if exposed to the lethal dose. Consequently, those individuals evading exposure survive and reproduce. This may lead to the development of behaviorally resistant strains. This is the behavior resistance. Next is the cross resistance. When resistance to the one pesticide confers the resistance to the another pesticide, even where the pest has not been exposed to the latter product. The cross resistance occurs because two or more compounds are acting on the same target site or are affected by the same resistance mechanism. Next is the multiple resistance, the simultaneous presence of several different resistance mechanisms in the same organism. The different resistance mechanism may combine to provide the resistance to the multiple classes of the pesticide. Next is the penetration resistance, a resistance mechanism essentially limited to the insects, in which the critical slows the penetration of pesticide into the body of the pest. Resistance mechanism. See, the agriculture pests use a variety of mechanisms to survive exposure to the toxicant. The resistance can develop more easily when two or more of these mechanisms are used at the same time. The resistance mechanism fall into following general categories: metabolic detoxification, reduced sensitivity at target site, reduced penetration, sequestration, behavior resistance. This is the potential for the resistance development. These are the biological factors. Okay. Accordingly, if population size is small, then there is a
निनादला रे मोरया नाद निनादला तणु रक्त पुष्पा परी देह रंगला.
lower potential for the resistance development. If population size is large, then there is a higher potential for the resistance development. Likewise, these are the factors: reproductive potential, generation turnover, type of reproduction, dispersal, seed bank, pesticide metabolism, number of target sites of pesticide, then pest host range. This is also the genetic factor. See, in managing the insect resistance, it is important to keep in mind that the primary objective to protect the crop or to control the vector, not necessary to kill the all insects. Okay. The overall strategy of avoiding overuse of a single insecticidal mode of action should be followed. Additional insecticide resistance management practices are given. Crop by pest versus regional practices. Crop by pest resistant management focuses on a single crop pest combination. They can be appropriate when the crop area is large and there is essentially one pest species only. Helicoverpa on tomatoes be treated with an insecticide, for example. General practices are use an integrated approach. This strategy, what the management of insecticide resistance required a consideration of all the aspects of crop production, including which are agronomic practices, physical and biological control methods, then insect pest biology, simply saying that the compiling with the concepts of integrated crop management can help to prevent the resistance from developing. For example, monitoring and adhering to the recommended pest or damages threshold, Then respecting the usefulness of natural enemies, carrying out the simple sanitation measures, removing the post-harvest residues in the field, using resistance crop varieties, simply avoiding the continuous year-round cultivation of a single crop can all help to slow and even prevent the resistance development. Use an integrated approach. Then protect the beneficial organism. That is, we have to protect the natural enemies of the pest insofar as possible. Okay, as far as possible, we have to protect the beneficial organisms. Use recommended application rates. We have to follow the recommended rates and the treatment interval as indicated on the insecticide labels. Okay. See, never apply more or less than the recommended rate. This affects harmful. Always make sure that the spray equipment is in good condition, nozzle filters are not blocked, then which causes spraying incorrect rates. Okay. Then rotate unrelated compound. Use a variety of compound registered for the using sequence from the unrelated chemical classes that are not cross-resistant. Never use a single compound or class. Then use mixture with caution. Mixture should be used with extreme cautions. Okay, and are not recommended except in the very limited situation or as an incorrect use of mixture can be excluded resistance. In particular, mixture should be never be used if target pest is already resistant to one of the mode of action in the mixture. Use synergies with cautions. The use of synergies which block or delay the metabolic detoxification of insecticides may improve their effectiveness and extend their useful lifetime in the synergists are applied at a non-toxic rate either before or at the same time as insecticide. Use non-specific products. Apply product with the care. Then monitor problematic pest. All these are the precautions or general practices taken. Next is the pesticide residue and the definition, then steps involved in the determination of the residues. First, define pesticide residue. The pesticide residue refers to the pesticide that may remain on or in food after they are applied to the fruit crops, that is pesticide residue. The limit remains for a long period of time. Any substance or mixture of substance in the food for man or animal resulting from the use of a pesticides and includes any specified derivatives such as degradation and conversion product, metabolites, reaction products, and impurities that are considered to be of toxicological significance. Which are the steps involved in the determination of the residues? Collection. See, collect a total composite samples of 10 kg by collecting 1 kg portion from each of 10 different bulk containers in a lot. The minimum amount of material to be submitted to the laboratory is as follows. The laboratory sample must be placed in a clean inert container offering adequate protection from the external contamination and protection against the damage to the sample in a transit. The container must then be sealed in such a manner that unauthorized opening is detectable and sent to the laboratory as soon as possible, taking any necessary precautions against the leakage or spoilage. For example, frozen food should be kept in frozen. Perishable samples should be kept in cool or the frozen. Fruits, vegetables, perishable commodities are advised to ship in dry ice while transporting from field to the lab. This is a commodity. Then this is an example minimum quantity required for the this collection process. After collection, there is a separation. The way in which the sample is taken for analysis is the first of a series of potential source of error in the food analysis. Some liquid food are reasonably homogeneous, but solid and semi-solid foods are most always heterogeneous. Okay. The taking of a representative sample is obviously the most difficult task. A liquid food, milk, generally need not only be well mixed or shaken before subsampling, This is about the semi-liquid. Then solid samples can be of three general types, namely finely divided, then an aggregate or whole unit. Finely divided dye product can be mixed for the subsampling using commercial processing equipment such as Jones divider or by spreading the sample over a large surface. This is the process of separation. After collection, then separation, then processing. The well-equipped food analysis laboratory should have a variety of sample preparation equipments, including mechanical chopper, miner, grinder, blender, hammer, or similar mills. Use of dry ice is recommended in the case of volatile and unstable molecules during the extraction. After processing, this is a cleanup technique. During extraction, the solvent comes in contact with the substrate matrix to enable the extraction of the pesticide along with some of the constituents of the substrate matrix also get solubilized. The extract not only contains pesticide residue but also other constituents which are called as co-extractives. The removal of an interfering co-extractive from the extract by the physical or chemical method is called as the cleanup. This co-extractive generally extracted along with the pesticides from the various substrate are moisture, color pigments like chlorophyll, xanthophyll, anthocyanin, colorless compounds like oil, fat, and the waxes. Next is the extraction. In that, solid phase extraction, solid phase micro extraction, accelerated solvent extraction, then microwave assisted solvent extraction, then supercritical fluid extraction, and stir bar subsue extraction. Extraction, what is that? Extraction means separation of pesticides residue from the matrix by using the solvent. Okay, the extraction procedure should be such that it is quantitatively remove the pesticides from the matrix, that not causes the chemical changes in the pesticides, and use inexpensive and easily cleaned apparatus. The extraction method and solvent type determine the extraction efficiency from the substrate. Okay, all these are the methods of the extraction. Make the screenshots of this slide for your further reference. Okay, today we'll stop here. Write down all these assignment for the semester questions like what is the fate of insecticides in soil and plant, define degradation, what is microbial degradation, what is enzymatic degradation, what is photodegradation, then what is insecticide resistance, write down its management, and last is define pesticide residues, explain the steps involved in the determination of the residues. Okay, today we'll stop here.